in the background. Yes, that is Bach. If you don't know your classical composers, I'm going to turn it down though, so I don't get dinged for copyright. But I'm gonna leave it on a little bit for you connoisseurs. All right. Um, so it's gonna be a fun topic. If if I have people get into the conversation, we're talking about comic books. Favorite one of my favorite digressions. To the people who don't know me well, in in my real life, they may think that's all I know about are like comic books. And that's usually just because that's how I make small talk with people that I'm not comfortable having deep conversations with on certain, social and political matters, like at work. At work, I keep things very light. So, people know that I talk about comic books and superheroes and sci-fi and anime, stuff like that. And so they would probably think that's all I'm interested in. When really, um, I just use that as a digression because I don't want to talk about like serious matters with people at work. Like I'm not going to get into like political discussions and debates, um, or anything like that, or talk about relationships or nothing, anything like that. So I keep it pretty light. Um, but here we're going to talk about it because I like it is something I don't talk about it just as a digression, but because I actually love comic books and all that sort of stuff. And I wish I had got into it earlier. Like when I was little, I used to buy like comic books at 7-Eleven or wherever. Usually when I was going with my dad to go on a trip or something. But I didn't get into it too heavily until much later. And he would just buy me a comic book so I have something to read when we had our little fishing trips. To people starting to come into the chat room, what's up? Let me look at something here. But yeah, good. I wanted to see if people were coming to the chat room so I can make sure that I wanted to. I was just about to check to see if this was live, but it is live. I mean, the not live. I know it's live. I'll make sure that this is public because you can go live without it being public, and which is defeats the whole purpose. But if you don't set the filter, that could happen by accident. So good, it's public, so everyone can see it. Um, and of course, if people are talking about stuff that are diversions to the topic, I'm just going to ignore them, especially trolls. So, um, the topic du jour is the Ameri- the American comic book industry is failing. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't actually reading comics and stuff. But what we see happening is that more people are gravitating towards manga. And if you're pedantic like I am, manga and manhwa. Manhwa is the Korean version of manga comics. And I think there's a couple of reasons. I don't think it's just one reason. I think it's multiple reasons leading to it. There's no one silver bullet, but I think there's multiple reasons why uh, the comic book industry is failing, and we can see it because like a lot of comic book stores have closed over the past 20 plus years. Like I remember pretty much going like anywhere and I could find a comic book store. Like like there was one right across the street from the mall. Um, when I was in college, there was one right across the street. Actually, there is one right across the street from my alma mater now, but but it's different. It's a franchise, whereas back in the day, it was like an independent comic book store. Even though that place is a franchise, I still support them. Shout out to Third Eye Comics. They are great. And I keep saying that I want to visit their College Park location next to my alma mater. I've only been to the one in Annapolis. There's also one in North Virginia. There's one way down in Southern Maryland, and there's one in Pennsylvania, I believe. I think it's in Pennsylvania. Yeah, like right on the border. Um, so yeah, uh, I want to go to the one in College Park. I would like to go to the one in Southern Maryland too, but that's way too far. Like Maryland, Maryland doesn't seem like a big state, but it's really sprawled out. Like from the BW, the Baltimore Washington regions down to like Southern Maryland, that's like 3 hours. So yeah, nah. But yeah, so yeah, we see a lot of the comic book stores going. So like one instance was J.A.C Comics. I remember J.A.C Comics used to be like right at this little shopping center right across from Security Square Mall in Woodlawn, Maryland. Woodlawn, Maryland is a town in Baltimore County, which is the suburbs of Baltimore City, right? Uh, and so it was a nice comic book store. And then they moved across the street, I guess, because it was a better location or better maybe better rent. I don't know. And then it just disappeared. And then I saw that they were down in downtown Baltimore. So they had a locate. They it wasn't a comic book store, but instead in downtown Baltimore, um, right in the inner harbor, they had a museum, and they had like some really nice stuff. Like they had like a first a first print edition of Batman, which was worth I think like 1 point something $1 million because it was published in 1939. It was a first edition, so they had that and some other stuff in that Jeppes museum. And I don't know why, but every time I was down there, I never went in there. I don't know why I didn't, and now I miss out. I miss the fact that I didn't ever go in there and look around because it's gone. That failed too. Like, how does a museum fail? So they went from having a comic book store location right near me at my like mall where I, used to go to as a kid, um, then to having a museum with comic book type stuff in downtown Baltimore. They're completely gone. A lot of other little independent comic book stores just evaporated as well that I used to go to. There was one briefly in the mall. I remember one of my cousins was like, "Hey, you should go check out this comic book store in Security Square Mall. It was like a black owned comic book store." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna show my support because one, I want the comic book store to stay around, and two, it's a black owned store. So I was like, I want to support. I'm gonna go support their brother's business." So I bought like a few things. I know I bought like a comic book or two, and I bought a Dungeons and Dragons, the whole role playing game, um, like a beginner set, since I never played it before. Still haven't played the game. I still have it here. I haven't played it, but I bought the entire starter pack and all of that. And even though it costs more, because I saw it because the same one because I was originally eyeing it on Amazon and it was cheaper on Amazon, but I was like, nah, I'm gonna support this brother's business, and I bought it. Unfortunately, he still didn't do enough. I guess he didn't do well enough, and they closed it. and I felt bad until I found out that he didn't go out of business. He moved his location to out to Prince George's County, which is cool because he probably would find a whole slew of black nerds in the Prince George's County region, which is like um, in the Washington suburbs, in the Washington D.C. suburbs, um, and PG County used to be like the wealthiest black um, community in America. Now I think a lot of those folks have actually left PG and moved uh, into the neighboring Charles County, Maryland. But for many decades, like Prince George's County was known as like the wealthiest black community in America. For you folks who don't know, so I was like, yeah, he's gonna find probably a better a better customer base out in Prince George's County. So I was glad that he didn't completely shut her down. That he just moved to a better location. But it sucks for me because it was nice having like a comic book store I could just check out when I run through the mall. Um, but at the same time, they had to compete against a comic book store location right up the street. Like it wasn't as close as like next, like being in a shopping center next door, like right across from the comic book store. But it was like right, it was like 10 minutes drive, 5 to 10 minutes driving distance away from. So I used to go there all the time and bought a lot of stuff. I even brought friends to the place and introduced new customers to them. Like I brought a, a friend at the time who I was interested in, a female friend, and she bought me a comic. um, she bought me a nice little graphic novel because I think I had bet her or something like that, and she lost, so she bought me the graphic novel. We used to always bet each other stupid stuff. Like in another instance, I lost a bet with her, so I had to eat seafood. And that probably doesn't sound bad to most folks, but I hate seafood. So, um, then I had some other friends I brought there, and they left too. Now they didn't shut down either, but they closed that location and moved all the way out to Lincoln, Maryland. Lincoln, Maryland. Again, most of you people aren't from Maryland, don't know anything about Maryland outside of probably Baltimore, so you don't know. But Lincoln is where BWI Airport is, which is now BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. Okay, um, so that is a hike. That is a serious trek from where I live. Like that's like a that's almost like it's almost 40 minutes getting there. Like I could get to the DC area in the same distance it takes me to get all the way out to Linthicum. So I've been out there like several times, but it's not as much as if they were right down the street as they used to be when I used to go there like probably not every week, but probably like every other weekend I would go out there, buy stuff. They had a little gig, they had like a discount membership card. So, but the fact that these people have to keep changing locations, consolidating their stores and all this other. It's just showing that they aren't doing very well. Like I said, except for like Third Eye Comics, who have hit upon some sort of formula to do well. I think the reason why they do well is that they don't just do comics. Like they have their comic book store, then they have a Third Eye store for like games and music, and they have a location where they buy people's books and toys to resell. I remember I was trying to resell some toys, and I had been waiting for 3 years to do it. And I finally said, "Forget it. Like it's been 3 years. I'm just gonna like give these things away." So that's what I did. Um, And again, if you folks aren't commenting on the topic of comic books, I'm just gonna straight up ignore you, flat out. Um, so anyway, um, the reason why I was saying though that besides that a lot of comic book stores are closing, have are closing or have closed down over the past few decades, is that the sales of the actual comics have gone down. Like, and then like the industry is so messed up. Like you wouldn't know by the best selling books that there's a wide berth of different types of comic books you can buy. Like the biggest selling stuff are superhero stuff, and out of that it's mostly Batman. Now he is my favorite comic book hero, um, but he was my favorite comic book hero before the entire industry was just basically all Batman. Okay, like in 2025, like the best-selling books, almost all of them were Batman, and most of them were the new Absolute Batman, uh, Elseworlds comics. So Absolute Batman is like a reimagination of Batman if he was like not a billionaire, but um, just regular Joe with like almost superhuman power. Like his bat signal is actually a freaking like battle axe that's attached to his uniform. It's crazy. And then, like I said, it's a whole absolute worlds universe where it's not because there's an absolute Batman, there's an absolute Wonder Woman, there's a Superman, there's an absolute Martian Manhunter, absolute Aquaman, and so forth. So, and those were like the best selling, uh, the absolute Batman have been like the best selling books outside of the Deadpool and Batman and that that crossover that Marvel and DC did last year. Uh, it was one in September where it was one written by Marvel. That was the Batman. I'm sorry, that was the Deadpool Batman crossover. And then in November, DC did their own crossover where they wrote the story, and that was Batman and Deadpool. And so those were two different storylines. Like they're not the same, even though they both say Deadpool and Batman and Deadpool. Confusing, but again, whoever takes the um, you know, name comes first is is the is the comic book company that's writing it. So with Deadpool and Batman last September of 2025, I bought that. I still gotta buy Batman Deadpool because that one's written by DC Comics. The Deadpool Batman one in September is written by Marvel. And then there was a Batman #1, so they just restarted the whole Batman storyline in the canon because the Deadpool and Batman and Deadpool aren't canon. Those are like Elseworlds or whatever. Like they're alternative storylines, right? But the canon storyline was restarted under Batman #1, and he has a whole new redesigned uniform. Just doesn't look bad. So uh, those sold well. So those crossovers did well, and they had all these different variant covers by different artists. It was really cool. Um, so it was pretty much all Batman inundated 2025 that sold well, and even though they sold well, they still didn't hit the numbers that manga hit. in manga, the stuff that was hitting like Dan to Dan and One Piece and what else was selling? Um, I don't know whatever's like really good in anime right now. Like the corresponding manga is kicking ass. Like they were putting up numbers in like the multi millions just just slaying the American comic books. And then it's more then I guess people are saying, well, there's more diversity in manga. It's not just superheroes. It's like you have like everyday stuff, which they call slice of life. Um, you have the shonen stuff, which is like the action for like teenagers and like young men. You have the shoujo, which is for like girls, like for like teenage girls, young women. Then you have the stuff for kids, like like Pokemon and all that, Digimon. Then you have like horror and fantasy and sci-fi and basically everything. Like the thing with manga and of course with its corresponding anime is that manga hits like every facet of literature. So any area of literature they have in manga. Whereas in comic books, like they're like don't get me wrong, there's more than just superhero stuff in American comic books, but pretty much that's the only thing they're selling is the superhero stuff. So it makes it as so for people looking for something different, they're more likely to gravitate towards manga than than American comic books, which is only superheroes. Now, personally, I prefer the superheroes, so that's why I still buy the superhero stuff. However, I don't buy a lot of the recent stuff. Most of the comic books I buy are back issues, and then most of those are the trade paperbacks, which is actually a good thing because the artists and writers actually make more when you buy the trade paperbacks than when you buy the single issue magazines. So that's a good thing. But I've been I've been mostly buying back issues because a lot of the recent stuff sucks, especially in Marvel. Like they like too many of the I won't blame it on the artists, but too many of the writers are trying to push their own like political agendas in these comics, which is mostly, woke, liberal, progressive type stuff. This is largely what made Marvel flop back in from like 2012 to 2015 when they did the whole all new, all different Marvel reboot. When you had Miss Marvel become Captain Marvel. Um, then the new Miss Marvel was Kamala Khan, which I actually liked the character, but most people, she didn't sell well. Um, then you then you had Ironheart, which that was a that that was a horrible comic book. Um, you had the new Captain America, which was Sam Wilson. Now people didn't like it in the movies, which the funny thing is people didn't like it in the comics either when he came out in 2014. So it was like, why would you put failed? Like this is why the multiverse saga didn't make sense. They took all the failed characters from all new, all different Marvel from 2012 and put it in the movies. Like why? Like if you were gonna take failed characters from the comic books to the silver screen, maybe you should have changed them up so they would be more likable. Also, another reason people didn't like them is because they didn't like derivative DEI characters. Like just get like people just want the legacy characters. Like they want Steve Rogers, okay? They want Bruce Banner, not Amadeus Cho. Yes, there was a Korean there was a Korean Incredible Hulk during the all new, all different Marvel. or Ironheart, this black girl who's just a genius and smarter than Tony Stark for no reason other than she's just black girl magic, right? And then when they made the Disney Plus series about her, they made her just as unlikable as she was in the comics. Like you could have tweaked her character to make her more likable in the series, but they didn't. They chose to make her just as unlikable. Even worse, in the Disney Plus series, she was pretty much she was damn near a villain. It's like, yo, good, like who 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 greenlit this? Check my chat filter really quick. Alrighty, righty. So that's another facet. So like I said, one, you got people, you have um, the comic book stores failing because they gotta compete with like online sellers like Amazon, and then or they had to compete against the big bookstores like Barnes and Noble. And I'm not gonna lie, I went to Barnes and Noble to buy graphic novels sometimes, but most of the time I just went to my local comic book store. I was like, no, I'm going to support my local comic book store. Real. I mean, to keep it completely 100 though, I would go where whatever was most local, and usually the local comic book store was closer to me than Barnes and Noble. Now, if there was a Barnes and Noble at the mall in um in place of a comic book store, then I would have probably been going to that Barnes and Nobles all the time because even if they didn't have a certain book, they could probably order from you. But so could the comic book store. And the comic book store was just more personable though anyway. So that's why I still would favor the comic book store. Even though I wouldn't lie, I would probably go to Barnes and Noble most of the time. I also hit the comic book store because it's more personable. Like usually you get to know the owners of the store. They're usually like really cool people. Anything they don't have in the store, they will usually personally order for you. And most of the time, like they wouldn't even charge you extra for ordering it. Like I've had them order me like costumes or collectibles and stuff. So well, almost every comic book store I went to, like the owners are cool as shit, and they're very approachable. Whereas if you go to somewhere like Barnes and Noble, you're not gonna know the franchise owner. More than likely, you're not gonna know the franchise owner of that store, much less have them you know carry on a conversation with you about like their favorite books and stuff like that. If you do though, kudos to you though. If you do can chill and just uh, chat it up with a Barnes and Noble franchise owner. Barnes and Noble is failing too. Funny thing was Barnes and Noble used to have a rival. If you guys remember, some of the older folks, it was called Borders. Well, I think it was called what, Borders Books and Music, and they were just as nice as Barnes and Noble. I liked them equally to Barnes and Noble. If anything, I may have liked them more because they had like a nice music collection. But as most music stores have flopped as well. Again, shout out to Third Eye Comics because they have a thriving vinyl section. Because apparently, and I usually diss Gen Z, but I'm gonna give shout out to Gen Z, you Gen Z folks, um, who all 1.2 of you that watch this. But shout out to Gen Z because they have appreciated buying vinyl records again, and also I've seen some people even um, rocking Walkmans again. Now the Walkmans I know never died in Japan. Like they were still playing cassette tapes back in like the 2000s. Like they were. I was like, wow, okay, they still rocking cassettes. But Yeah, vinyl records are in. So, because I was thinking about getting some vinyl records, and and Third Eye sells like record players too. Like they have these new record players. They're digital, but they play vinyl records. And I think you can even buy. I think they even had a machine there that they can do. They can they can convert your physical copies. Like they also like not only are they selling vinyl, but they're selling VHS tapes. So Gen Z has turned into like have become connoisseurs of uh of vintage 80s type of uh low lo-fi uh low like it's a lo-fi, well, just vintage tech. Like they're into vintage tech. Like so, VHS tapes are back again. So for all you folks who threw away all your VHS tapes, you should be shaking your hands in the air like Skeletor. Curses you, He-Man. But yeah, VHS tapes are back again. So I go to Third Eye Comics to their games and music, and they're selling VHS tapes again. Like VHS tapes are back in with Gen Z. Vinyl records are back with them. They have record players. They have these new digital players for VCRs, and they have like the machines that can convert your VHS to like DVD or Blu-ray. And I think there's something they can convert with the digital to record to vinyl record as well. So they sell all that sort of stuff. It's not like I should be like they should be giving me money because I'm giving them all these little alley oops, all these big ups. But no, I do like the place because, like I said, it's not too many mom and pop comic book stores around. Like I said, there's still a few around, but they're not close to me. Like there's one that I used to go to all the time, all the way in East Baltimore, and that was cool when I was working on that side of the when I was working on that side of town. But because I used to go there like every day, like after I left after I left the psychology clinic where I was working, and it was nice. It was like it was nice to it was a nice stress relief to go into the comic book store just to talk to the owners. They'd even offered me a part-time job on Sundays to help them out, um, and they would just pay me in comics. I should have took that offer when I had it. I could have bought, man, I could have had so many comics. Plus, I would have just had fun being in there at the time. Like work, like it wouldn't have been really work. It would have just been like me having fun, talking to people, organizing comics, and getting paid in comics for my time. That would have been that was such a great offer. I'm really kicking myself for not taking that offer. And since then, so their store is still there, but the original owner sold it to a new owner, and the new owner, she seems okay. But it was just that when I went back there, like I don't have any relationship with the new owner as I did with the original owners, the mom and pop. Like it was literally like a husband and wife that worked there. They were really cool. Called I think it was called Spiral Comics. Shout out to them off of I believe York Road in Baltimore. Check it out if you ever are in town, or if you and if you want to check out Third Eye Comics. Like I said, they're in Annapolis. Uh, they're in College Park. Uh, there's one in Pennsylvania, one in North Virginia, one in Southern Maryland. I don't remember the area. Um, then there's the other place in Lincoln, out towards BWI Airport, um, called what's the name of them? I can't. Well, it'll come to me later. Pause. um. Anyway, so again, so you have the comic book stores failing because they got to compete against big box stores and online sellers like Amazon. Then you have the comics themselves not selling as well because there's less diversity because the only thing being pushed are the superhero comics, although there's all sorts of stuff out there, but it's not as diverse as it used to be. Like back in like the silver age of comics, back in like the 50s and 60s, and then even into the bronze age of comics. Like you had like horror comics. You had like horror comics and fantasy comics and stuff like that. It wasn't all just superhero stuff. The superhero stuff took over in the modern age of comics, like in the 80s till now. And you still have like a bunch of stuff out there that's independent that isn't just like superheroes. But again, a lot of people aren't aware of the non superhero comic books out there. But there are plenty of comics for people who aren't into superheroes. Like for instance, The Boys. It seems like it's actually the Boys, which became an Amazon series. Although the showrunner completely destroyed what the original what the original comic book was about because the showrunner Eric Kripke has made the show all about being anti-Trump and anti-MAGA, which was not the focus of the original comic book. The original focus of the comic book was a world where superheroes were the bad guys because the creator of the comics didn't like superheroes. Like he made it pretty clear that he disliked superheroes. So in his comic book, the superheroes were the bad guys. That's what it was about. But instead of keeping it on that focus, like the showrunner for the Amazon series made it all about anti-Trump and being anti-conservative and anti-MAGA. I'm like, come on. So you're gonna like shit on half the country and like whatever. Like it was all right in the first two seasons. It wasn't as overt, like putting all his political bullshit into it. But by the third season, it was just like, dude. And it got worse in the fourth season. And then the spinoff show Gen Z, I'm sorry, Gen V, is even worse. It's just all about it's just all LGBTQ and being woke and all. Gen V is horrible. Like the first season was bad, but the second season was even worse. I couldn't even get past the second episode. Like into the second episode, I was like, nah, I'm not doing this. And I know you have to watch the Gen V, the second season of Gen V to watch the final season of The Boys. But to be honest, I'm fine with not watching the last season of The Boys because it's just completely horrible. And they go like the showrunner goes into so much effort to make the Homelander um, into a stand-in for Trump that has kind of backfired. That has made people actually like Homelander because he is a stand-in for Trump. I was like, yeah, you didn't think this through, did you? But anyway, not to go into that diversion about the boys, but but my original point is just that not all American comics are about superheroes, but a, a huge amount of them are. And for people looking for something else besides superheroes, again, I do prefer the superhero stuff. But for a lot of people who don't want the superhero stuff, they're turning to manga or manhwa, which is the Korean version of manga. Interesting note on that. The reason why manhwa is increasing in popularity, similar to manga, uh, corresponds to the fact that a lot of the Japanese animation studios are actually hiring Korean artists for their Japanese anime uh, sh- movies and shows. Like if you look, if you start looking at the credits at like your favorite anime, you're gonna find like a lot of Korean artists. And so that's why I think a lot of them was just like, well, instead of taking their talent to the Japanese animation studios or to the Japanese manga um, manga companies, why don't we just do it in house? And that's what they did. Like, so a lot of these artists and writers have stayed in house in South Korea and birthed manhwa. I think there's also some other local varieties in China, Indonesia, and the Philippines, but those aren't as popular as manga in Japan and manhwa in South Korea. But there are like some, but there are also versions of it in China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. But when I'm so for the nonce, when I say manga, I'm just going to use that as like an umbrella term for all of those East Asian uh, comics, comic books and stuff. Okay, so like I said, there's way so manga is kicking their butt because there's way more diversity in the stuff that in the sort of stuff they have, which is not just superheroes, but all sorts of different heroes and bad guys and characters and complexity. And Japan doesn't have to, and the Japanese culture also is a selling point for a lot of readers who don't feel like having these writers in America's leftist leftist ideas being pushed on them when they read their comics. Like they don't like, for instance, like making like they would just started making characters gay or bisexual and lesbian for no reason. Like um, Tim Drake is now bisexual. Why? Why? You know that he was the third Robin for you guys, Tim Drake. And if you watch Batman the animated series back in the '90s, he was like, uh, there wasn't even a third Robin. There was just, I mean, he was the second Robin because they didn't introduce Jason Todd in the animated series. It just went from Dick Grayson, who left and then became Nightwing, and then to Tim Drake. So they left Jason Todd out of it because I guess they didn't want to do that storyline where you have a Robin who's basically just like Dick Grayson until he becomes like just defiant for no reason, and then ends up dying by his own, through his own, you know, stubbornness or whatever. But anyway, so a lot of people grew up on Tim Drake because he became like the Robin most people knew back in the late '80s, right? And then in the '90s because of the Batman the animated series. And so then they just randomly decide to make him bisexual now. Or Superman's son, Jonathan Kent, he's gay. Why? Why? Um, and it was like, so they're pushing like these leftist ideas into these comics. So that's pushing people away because to be sure, most comic book readers are pretty open minded and do tend to be more leaning to the left. But throughout, but all the comic book readers, like I think collectively would be moderate because the American general public is moderate, despite what some people have you believe that you know the most of Middle America is like moderate to conservative, um, and but that's not reflected in these comics by some of these writers. Like it got so bad that they took out with Superman's ethos, truth, justice, and American way, and they took out the American way out of it. Like That's what he's known for. Like he's literally wearing a uniform that reminds you of the American flag. Like it's just crazy. So you got that. And then, like I said, it, all of these things are why the comic book industry is failing. But it looks like Noah's really rocking with me on this topic, so I might bring this to a close um, in a few minutes if no one's really rocking with this, and then you know I can always bring this topic again on another day because I've actually talked about this before, like a year or so ago. So this isn't exactly I'm like treading new water here. So, but it was interesting to me because I've like watching people like Nerdrotic. Um, you can check out his YouTube channel. The guy behind Nerdrotic, I think his name is Gary. He used to be a comic book store owner, and so he still follows this stuff. And he was talking about how the American comic book industry is failing, but manga is thriving. Like a lot of readers are gravitating towards manga. Like I even have a few manga, but not a lot. Like I have the first the first trade paperback for Dragon Ball Z, like the first stories. And it's interesting because it was different from what I saw in the cartoon, which was which was poorly. The original Dragon Ball Z was poorly made. I'll just say that it was good, but compared to what was in the comics by Akira Toriyama, not as good. Uh, then I have a Batman manga. Yeah, so some Japanese artists actually were licensed by DC to do a story about Batman. It was actually two different artists. One was literally called Bat Manga, where it took the Silver Age Batman and made a bunch of stories about the Silver Age Batman. So that was cool. Then the other one was like just a was by a different Japanese writer and artist, where it was a manga, but it was set in like it was Batman set in modern times. So those are the only three. No, I have more than that. I have a One Piece manga um, that that starts the story when it's a prequel to Ace to which was Luffy's. Well, if you don't know One Piece, you don't know who Luffy is. There is a Netflix live action version of One Piece if people want to see that, but the story is completely a bit different than the manga and the anime. And I wouldn't tell you to start on the anime because the anime is has been going for like 30 years, something like that. Is a lot of episodes to get through for the anime, but you can get through the manga pretty quickly. I'm guessing. Well, more quickly than the anime because you can read that stuff more quickly than going through all those episodes with all the fluff and. But anyway, so yeah, I have a One Piece manga, which is like it's a prequel to the story of Ace, which was Luffy's brother. Um, and I have another manga. Oh, of One Punch Man. I have a manga of One Punch Man. Let me check this chat filter again. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, no. So yeah, so I guess people just weren't really one to contribute. That's cool. Um, I'm tired anyway. I'm probably about to hit the hay in a sec. Um, but I would have enjoyed talking to some folks who read comics or manga or watch anime or watch superhero shows to have something to bounce this off, especially people who have frequented comic book stores and can kind of verify what I'm saying, like how it's harder to find like these independent comic book stores, um, that are independent of like Barnes and Nobles or Amazon, right? Or that maybe a lot of people out there may prefer manga over American comic books. Now, I still prefer American comic books over manga, with the caveat that I'm mostly preferring them with the back issues from stuff from many years ago, not anything recent. Like when it is something recent, it's really something like good, like the Deadpool and Batman crossover. And Marvel and DC are going to do some more crossovers. Apparently, they start back somewhere around 2024 and 2025. They started getting along again, but they weren't getting along for a while. So they had a huge crossover um, uh, series that went out of publication, and they've brought it back into publication. And I was thinking of buying it, but it's a large volume. It's a I think it's like an omnibus of comic book stories, of all of the crossovers between them. And so the omnibus are good because you can get everything in one, but they tend to be pretty expensive. Although I'm pretty sure the artists and writers get paid more from when you buy those the big omnibus and the trade paperbacks and the graphic novels as opposed to buying them in the single issue comics. But they're getting along again, so they're gonna do some more crossovers. I know a lot of people have their fingers crossed that they will do a crossover in the movies one day. I think as the comic book, as not only the comic book industry is dying, but superhero films are waning in popularity as well. That there may be some last ditch effort to have like a huge blockbuster once Marvel completely fizzles out. Because I believe after Secret Wars, once they do a because after Secret Wars in 2027, because in 2026 is Doomsday, and then 2027 is going to be Secret Wars. I believe when they because they've already stated that they are going to pretty much do a reboot of the MCU afterwards. That I think after they reboot, people aren't just going to check for it anymore. What's up, Eric? Wait, where you go? Uh, wait, why was he timed out? What in the world? Oh, for the caps, man. Okay, I might have to fix that on the Sorry, um, sorry, Eric. I might have to remove that from the um the AI moderator because sometimes caps is not always spamming. I don't. All right, let me. Um, yeah, I'm gonna get. I'm gonna take that off because sometimes the caps is not spamming. All right, I turned that off for 300 seconds. Damn, that was harsh. Yeah, I'm sorry if you are there. Like I turned that I turned that caps protection off because not every time people hit caps is like spamming. Now sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just to show like to show excitement, right? But yeah, like like I said, there are more there are more things in American comic books besides superheroes. If that's what's turning people off, that they're just burnt out with superheroes. Like I said, you can. It's not as much diversity as manga, to be honest. Like I said, manga does have more diversity of topics than American comic books do, because as I said earlier, every facet of every subgenre of literature you can find in manga. Like literally every subgenre of literature you can find in manga. Whereas you would be hard pressed in American comic books to find some of the more niche genres of literature um, that you can find in manga in American comic books. So, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, I do love the superhero stuff. That's what I come to the comic books for. Is specifically the superhero stuff. But I didn't always like I said, when I first started reading comics, I would read Spider Ham, which was like the parody of Spider Man, which is a pig in an alternate universe, Peter Porker, who becomes Spider Ham. I used to like that as a kid, and then there was another comic that I liked, but it wasn't superheroes. I think it was like Top Dog or something like that. I think it was like Top Dog or something. And then I would read like trade paperbacks of comic strips like the Peanuts and Garfield. So I used to buy those. So as a kid, I wasn't even into the superhero stuff. Like I first got into the superhero stuff by watching Super Friends on TV in the early '80s, like Super Friends, and then the Amazing Spider-Man and Friends. That's when I first started watching like superhero type stuff, and then I went to like the movies to see Superman, not the original because that was in '78. I would have been like not even 1 years old then, but I watched Superman 3 and Superman 4 and Supergirl in the movies. Yes, there was already a Supergirl movie in the '80s, but it was horrible and no one talks of it anymore. Although it was connected to the Christopher Reeve Superman universe by Richard Donner, and even referenced him in the movie. But that movie, the Supergirl movie back in the '80s, flopped hard. So I wonder if there'll be any cheeky references to it in the new Supergirl movie coming out this summer, which I'm not inspired to watch at all. Like I don't like the fact that the trailer shows Crypto peeing on the image of Superman, and that basically like Zara Kara Zor-El, she's basically like a female version of Star Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, because it seems like James Gunn is a one trick pony and he can only keep remaking the same type of movie over and over again. Like even Superman, I really liked the Superman movie last summer, but it still was similar to like a team effort sort of thing. And it seems that's all James Gunn knows is like these little team, um, these movies with the little superhero teams made up of quirky people who have to get along to like kick butt. Yeah, I turned off the caps, Eric. That is getting on my nerves because it's been doing that to a lot of folks. So I turned off the caps protection. My apologies for that. But yeah, do you? I mean, what you think? Is that sound like it's true that seem like the American comic book industry is failing? Like I said, you got the comic book stores closing left and right. They have to compete with Amazon. They got to compete with Barnes and Noble. Um, then you have like the comic books just being superheroes mostly, and out of superheroes, pretty much all they do is market Batman. Like there's like thousands of superheroes in American comic books. They just keep pushing the super. They just keep pushing Batman. Eric says I enjoy Superman. I think it was the best movie. Yeah, I mean, wait, which Superman? You mean the one that came out last year, or you mean the original one in 1978? I see it. No worries. American comics have been shifting more towards indies. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the problem is like, um, the there are a lot of indie comics, and that's what I was trying to say. Because when I saw the guy Gary from Nerdrotic talking about it, he was saying mostly the American comics just keep pushing the superhero stuff. But I was like, that's not true. There's a lot of indie comics. Like, matter of fact, there are comic cons that you can go to now where it's made up of almost all entirely like indie comic book artists and writers. But the thing is, they aren't selling in the numbers that they need to keep it afloat. Eric says Marvel and DC are losing their prominence. Said the one from this year. Oh, the one from this year over the summer. Okay, yeah, it was good. A lot of folks like kind of dunked on it, but I liked it. He, it, it. The movie definitely had its flaws, but at the end of the day, the character felt like Superman. And I know like a lot of gripes people had was okay, well, they made his parents evil. Um, he kept getting his butt kicked in the movie. Um, his his cousin is like this little his cousin now is like this drunk bimbo version of Supergirl. So I get all the complaints, or did they said the most well fleshed out character was actually Mr. Terrific. I actually enjoyed that because I felt that the CW did Mr. Terrific such a disservice that I welcome seeing a fully fleshed out version of Mr. Terrific in the Superman movie. Like the CW did him so dirty. Like one, they made him gay for no reason, and then on top of that, it took away his original origin story. Like his origin story was that his wife and he lost his wife and child. On top of that, for some reason, he had a fro, and then when he would go into battle on every episode of the Arrow, his then he would go from a fro to cornrows. And I'm like, why would he cornroll his hair going into battle? I'm like, did they not have not one black person working on that TV show to be like, this is stupid? First of all, then on top of that, it takes like several hours to cornroll your hair, right? It didn't make any sense. And on top of that, he was like a crusty sidekick to a fake version of Barbara Gordon when he's literally the third smartest person in the world. She should have been under him, not he under her. And he couldn't fight. He was the weakest fighter on the team, which again didn't make sense because the dude was like a multi gold Olympus winner and knew like multiple fighting styles and like so they did him so dirty on the CW. I welcome seeing a fleshed out version of him in Superman because it portrayed him exactly how he is in the comics. Like he's led the Justice League team on occasions. I really like Mr. Terrific in the movie. Yeah, he was cool, man. He was so cool, and he's one of my favorite heroes. One of the reasons I like him as a black superhero is because one, it's not all he being a black superhero isn't his whole identity. Like I mean, I like Black Panther, but everything about Black Panther is about him being like this black African leader or Black Lightning. I hate. I won't. Sorry, I won't say I hate Black Lightning, but he is so fucking corny. And in the CW, they made him even more corny. Uh, Eric says, "Yep, I follow a company called the Ripperverse, which I like. It is a superhero-based large universe. Most of the heroes are based in Texas. I enjoy it. Yeah, like I said, the problem with the indies are they don't have the they don't have the numbers, the selling numbers that the other stuff do. And like I said, back in 2025, almost all the things they were selling were all almost all Batman, and out of that, it was mostly absolute Batman from the the absolute universe. And then the stuff that wasn't absolute Batman was absolute Martian Manhunter. Um, I think that was a absolute Superman, Batman number one, Deadpool and Batman and Deadpool. Like those were all the books that had the highest selling numbers of 2025. So the indies can't compete with that because pretty much the only thing being really pushed by the industry was Batman all last year. Like you wouldn't know that there's like all these different sorts of stuff out there. Like, and even within the indies, not all of the indies are superheroes. Like you have like some stuff that aren't there's like um they got all sorts of crazy like indie stuff out there. But again, people wouldn't know it because unless you're like a serious comic book geek, like to the casual observer, all American comics are just superheroes and pretty much just DC and Marvel. People like even with the big within all the big companies, like because you also have like Dark Horse, you have Image, and you have what's the other one? The one that was just bought out by I forgot, but the one that was just bought out 2 years ago. So you have the big five comic book companies, but like I said, most casuals only know DC and Marvel, and then other people know the other three, but most people don't know all those little indie comic book companies out there. Eric says the CW's consultants were either garbage or not listened to. Yeah, even worse. So they had Black Lightning meet up with John Spartan, with John who was like the Arrow's sidekick in the Green Arrow show, and for some reason, so every like when he and Black Lightning would come to agreement, they just kept saying by any means necessary. They would just shake their heads like, yeah. I'm like, this is so corny. Like, just because they black, they gotta keep using the Malcolm X line by any means necessary. I'm like, who the fuck wrote this shit? It was so bad. I'm like, y'all could have got one. Y'all could have got like a black writer, like, and I mean when I say a black writer, not just a black writer, like a black writer from an actual like urban like urban background. Like it was the Arrow. Like I like the Arrow the first 3 seasons. After that, it got so fucking corny. Like he didn't need a team. Like why was there a team Arrow and a team Flash? These people worked by themselves. Like Arrow had a sidekick because Arrow was always like a low budget version of Batman just with a bow and arrow. But he didn't have a team. Neither did Flash have a team. It was don't get me started. This will become a whole rant about why CW sucks. Eric said, yes, I like how they didn't attach Mr. to some other hero as a sidekick. He is a hero and was important to the team. Exactly. Like I said, the CW just did him so dirty. They made him gay and a sidekick to to like a Timu version of Barbara Gordon, and they made him like the weakest character. And for completely no reason, he would have a fro that would be corn rolled every time they go out to battle. Like when Arrow would be like suit up, and then he would come back with fresh corn rolls. I'm like, what the fuck? What is wrong with these people? It didn't make any sense. Actually, yeah, very true. Ripperverse self publishes, so they don't ever go through the same channels as other comics. Yeah, like I said, the indies are cool, but for them to do well, the comic book industry has to do well as a whole for the indies to do well. So like which means basically that the big companies have to do well because a large tide, you know the cliche, a large tide carries all the boats, whatever. But anyway, and I completely butchered that cliche, but you know what I mean. But but yeah, the end the indies depend on the big companies to do well, because if the big companies don't do well, then they won't do well by extension, because usually what happens is people come to the indies through the big companies like DC and Marvel and Image and Dark Horse, and through them, like, they venture off and to these independent artists. Like, usually I get introduced to them like at Comic-Con, because I'll see these independent artists and writers, at their booths, and I'll see, what they're offering, and and they'd be like, hey, you want to check this out? I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm not going to turn down, like, some freebies. So I would check it out and be like, yeah, this is cool. I got introduced to a independent artist in the Philippines that way. He was a brother from Maryland, like myself, who moved to the Philippines and started his own company. He started a toy and comic book company there, and he also had his own little fast food hustle. Um, um, but yeah, like, so the messed up thing is, if the big companies do bad, then the indies are going to suffer as a result, because the usually DC and Marvel are the gateways to the smaller companies out there. Eric said Black Lightning almost made racist. That show was man. That show was terrible. Yeah, I watched it for 2.5 seasons, and halfway through the third season, I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. I cannot do it. His daughters were so it was just so generic. It was just so corny. And that stupid sound effect when they would do like some little superpower thing. It was so my my niece and nephew loved the show though. So yeah, my niece and nephew used to watch it all the time, and my sister will watch it with them. I hate it. Like, by the third season, I just hated the show. I could not get past the second half of the third season. It was just so bad. And this guy is old, and on top of that, the guy who plays him is old as fuck. Like, he has to be in his 50s. Like, I remember the reason I know he's old was that he used to play the boyfriend to the character on Living Single. So you remember, so Living Single was a black sitcom on Fox, which literally was which Friends literally ripped off. Like, the show Friends that became big with Rachel and Ross was literally a white ripoff of Living Single on Fox back in the day. Like, they didn't think that show could do well, so they took that and made a white version of it, and that became Friends. Meanwhile, Living Single was still doing decently well on Fox, and one of the characters played by Queen Latifah was this character named Khadijah, and she was sort of like a representation of Queen Latifah in real life, who had started her own hip hop magazine in real life, Flavor or whatever. So in the show, she did that, and she had this boyfriend, and this is in the early '90s, and dude was already like had to be like in his 20s or 30s back then. And so now it's the 2010s, and he's playing Black Lightning. I'm like, this dude is old as fuck. I mean, luckily he stayed in shape, but it's like, you got a dude that's like in his like in his 50s, pushing damn near 60, playing Black Lightning. The writing is just horrible. To their credit, though, I will give them this. You could, at least on Black Lightning, you can tell they actually had black writers on the show. My thing is, why didn't you have black writers on like Arrow or Flash when you had so many black characters on that show? Because they became completely unrelatable to most black people. Like I said, having a superhero who cornrows his hair before he goes into battle made absolute no sense. Like if I didn't watch that for my own, if I hadn't watched that in my own eyes and someone literally told me that, like, hey, there's a TV show where a black superhero goes from a fro to a cornrows before he goes into battle, I would have thought that was I would have thought they were even like I would have thought that was a parody or they were just like trying to be funny. But at least to Black Lightning's credit, as horrible as that show was, you could tell they had black writers, but it was still bad. And then it was still divorced from like the comics. Like Black Lightning in the comic books lived he well not lived, he worked in the ghetto of Metropolis. But in the show, it's a completely different city in a completely different world where there's not a Superman. Um, Eric says, "Yeah, I would agree with that. If DC and Marvel flop, everyone flops. Yeah, because they're like I said, they're the DC and Marvel are the anchors of the American comic book industry. So if they flop, then everything kind of goes sideways. Like I said, in the 2025 listing of top comic books, almost like almost all of them were DC, and out of that, almost all of them were Batman, except for like Absolute Martian Manhunter, and I think uh, Absolute Superman. The rest of them were issues of Absolute Batman, then Batman #1, then Deadpool and Batman, then Batman and Deadpool, and then another Batman like number 135 or something like that. I don't know, but it that doesn't bode well for the industry. And then when you look at the numbers, those numbers were nothing compared to the numbers that the manga was selling. Like the One Piece was selling, I think that was like number 1 or something like that. It's like One Piece and Dan Dan Dan, which I didn't even know that there was a manga for that. I've only watched the anime, which is on I've seen it on Netflix, and it's also on Crunchyroll. It's on Crunchyroll and Netflix. It's actually pretty good. Um, and like when you look at all the different manga that was selling well, they were all different genres of manga. Like they weren't all shonen, because usually in manga, like the biggest selling stuff is usually the manga. I mean, sorry, usually the shonen stuff. But a lot of the stuff wasn't even shonen, so they put up bigger numbers and more diversity in the stuff that people were buying than in with the American comic books. Eric says the comic industry was set up for failure in the 90s when they shifted from catering to readers to catering to collectors. Right. And that's actually which almost ended Marvel, because you had this huge comic book bubble burst because they tried to cater. So you're the only one I can talk to about stuff like this. You know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, they tried to cater to collectors, and the problem is you can't, like, they were trying to cater to collectors, but you're mass but you're mass producing these comics, which means they're not going to be worth anything, right? Like the only way to make them worth a lot is if they're rare, but like they're not like, I mean, people can buy them as collectibles, but they're not going to be worth anything if if they're made in the millions. So yeah, that that fatal mistake in the comic book industry almost killed Marvel. Like they almost sold themselves to whoever owned DC Comics at the time. Like who I think Warner owned them back then, or whoever owned DC Comics. They almost sold them to them, but instead what they did is, they cut production, and they licensed all of their superheroes out to different film studios, which is why when Marvel Studios formed, they didn't have any of their most famous superheroes under them. They didn't have Hulk, they didn't have Spider-Man, they didn't have the X-Men. So they started off using their C tier superheroes. Like, it's people don't realize it now, but Iron Man and like Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow, these were all C tier superheroes back then. Like before the MCU, the the marquee superheroes was Superman. I mean, sorry, not Superman. Sorry, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and the Hulk. Those were the big three. So they had to license out all that stuff to save themselves from going under and being bought out from another company because of that, because of the industry trying to cater to collectors. And it was a horrible idea when you're mass producing all these books. Like, the reason you had collectors were because people were buying stuff up from like 100 years ago that not 100 years, but you get like 80, 70, 80, 60 years ago, because most of these comics weren't around anymore, because kids usually back in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s and the 60s, they would read these comic books and then throw them away, or during the wars, these comic books would be recycled for the war effort. So a lot of these original printings from the 30s and the 40s didn't exist anymore. So that's what made them collectibles. But to mass market all these comic books in the 90s as collectibles, it didn't make any sense. So yeah, that was one of. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I completely forgot to mention that was like the first thing that happened in the comic books that kind of messed things up. So thanks for bringing that one up. Now Eric says the collector market has slowly destroyed the American comic book industry. True. Like, when I buy stuff, like, I buy stuff because I want it, not just because I think it's going to be rare going into the future. Like, you can't predict that, especially because, again, they're all mass produced. Like, it doesn't make sense to cater to a collector's market, when these things are all being mass produced. It that that doesn't make sense. The only way you can cater to collectors is by rare stuff that is rare, that no longer that rarely exist anymore, like the first editions of Superman and Action Comics #1 1938, or the first of Batman and Detective Comics #37 in 1939, stuff like that. um, but mass produced stuff aren't doesn't make sense to be catered to collectors. Now, how they try to do that is that they'll have all these variant, you already noticed, like, they do all these variant covers, and stuff like that. Like, they did that with Batman #1 last year when they came out. They had like these variant covers. Same thing with Deadpool and Batman. Or some versions would come as a hardcover instead of a paperback. Um, Eric's Flash was garbage after season 1. I give it the first 2 seasons. So I'll say the first 3 seasons of Arrow, and then the first 2 seasons of Flash. Because remember, Flash got so good that it actually, remember when after the first season of Flash, it actually eclipsed the Arrow. Like, it was doing better than the Arrow, and they started calling it, because they started calling it the Flash Arrowverse, because Flash was putting up better numbers than Arrow when it first came out. But then the Flash became worse than Arrow after its third season. Like, I stopped watching Arrow by its fifth season, and then I would only come back and watch the CW for the crossover events, because every year they would do the different crossovers. So I stopped watching both Flash and Arrow, but I would watch the mini series crossover event, I watched that, and then I watched the very final episode of of Arrow, and that was it. I didn't even watch the final of Flash because it was just so bad. Like I said, it was, to me it got worse than Arrow, and Arrow got really bad. Eric says I hated almost everything in the CW. Same here, man. Supergirl, like Super. I didn't really watch it when it was on. What was it? I think it was on CBS back in the day, and then after the first season, they took it from CBS to CW, and I heard so many people talk about um, that the second season was really bad because it became all about like feminism, like literally, like, and I know how people always say, "Oh, it's feminist." No, like they were literally pushing like feminism in it, like literally pushing it, and well, not, I mean, not literally pushing the word, but I mean like they were literally pushing the whole the whole concept and lifestyle and mantra. Like the whole second season became about feminism for some reason, and then they scaled it back on the third season. But I couldn't watch it. The actress they had playing her, she was pretty and she looked like Supergirl, but the show had no interest. Plus, what made it then another thing that was bad was they weren't even using storylines from the Supergirl comic books. They were literally taking Superman storylines and turning it into Supergirl episodes. I'm like, really? They're making so that was the other bad thing. Like so they were just taking Superman storylines and making it about Supergirl instead for the CW. Um, what was the other shows? The Vam that and that was a comic book, by the way. The vampire chick. The What was she, like a vampire doctor or veterinarian? Something weird. Like no, the I'm sorry, zombie. It was a female zombie, and I think every time she bit into someone or ate their brain, she gained their personality or intellect or something. And that was like an actual comic book. Then also Legends of Tomorrow. That was horribly bad. I think I watched like the first episode or two. Then it just the subsequent seasons just got really bad. But Legends of Tomorrow was really horrible. CW was just trash. It was just trash. And my sister used to laugh at me because I used to talk about how much I hated the CW shows. But they were so bad. And Fox, I'm not gonna let Fox off the hook either because Gotham was bad too. Gotham was pretty damn bad. Like I watched the first season. The first season wouldn't have been as bad except that it had Jada Pinkett as the bad guy. Like they made up a whole new supervillain just to have her in the show named and called her Fish Mooney, and she was like a gangster, who for whom Penguin worked. It was, yeah, Gotham was really bad. So Fox doesn't get off the hook too, but CW, everything on CW was like this teen drama bullshit. It was just horrible. I've heard the Superman show wasn't that bad. I only watched the first episode of it, and to be fair, the first episode wasn't bad. I just didn't like how the fact that they made it like about him having a family. Now he had two sons. He does have a son in the comic book, but he doesn't have two sons, like twins or whatever they are. But I heard that, but I've actually heard that there were quite some good episodes of the CW Superman. If so, that was like the only good show. And let's not forget that they never showed Batman until one of the crossover events where they actually brought in the voice actor from the Batman the animated series and had him play a old Superman who was evil. I'm like, what the fuck? Eric says they butchered everything. Like they, yeah, they literally did. Like everything they put on there was was ass. It was bad. Shane says the comic industry is failing because they're not gay and woke enough that people want a gay, disabled, black, Mexican Superman trans. No, that's not what the people want. That's actually the opposite of what I was saying. Like they you have too many woke writers pushing their own agenda in these books. And I was saying that's why Marvel flopped back in 2012 when they did a whole when they retcon all of their stories with the all new, all different Marvel. Like that flop. But what was funny was the Ultimate Marvel universe did that run actually did pretty well. And if people notice when the MCU started, a lot of the characters were more based on the Ultimate Marvel universe than the Earth 616 universe. This is where the black uh, Nick Fury came from. He came from the Ultimate Marvels universe where there was a black Nick Fury who they said looked like what's the actor's name? You know what I'm talking about, the guy who plays Nick Fury. Like he, they drew the character in Ultimate Marvel universe to looking like him, and so when they made the movies, they picked they picked him to play Nick Fury because that's literally how they had already made him look in the Ultimate Marvels universe, which was an alternate universe. So the first like the phase one of the MCU, you could say was loosely based off of the Ultimate Marvels universe. Uh, Eric says exactly. I remember everyone buying up Death of Superman as an investment, and those are some of the least valued comics. Yeah, man. I got two versions. I've got two of them, and like I said, one of them like it's not a first printing, but it's from back then. It's not like one of these newer ones that were like published uh decades later. But it's because it's not worth anything. Or I had the wedding. Uh, then I think I also had the wedding of Superman. I have that. Like the now to be fair, the Death of Superman did sell really well back then. When it first came out, it sold really well. But I remember when that happened, I'm like, they're not gonna kill off the biggest superhero, the biggest superhero in the world. I was like, that's gonna last for a good year. And I was right. So after the Death of Superman, you had the soup the reign of the Supermen with all these little different characters like Steel and Cyborg Superman and Superboy and all this sort of stuff. Um, that lasted a year, and then after that, they brought back Superman. That's when he came back with the mullet and the all black uniform, looking completely metal and completely he looked like so 90s. Like that was a complete 90s look for him, the mullet and the all black Superman outfit. I don't know what you're talking about, Leaf Juggler. Eric says because there are so many out there. Yeah, yeah, that's what I said. It's not worth anything. I just wanted it for my own collection, but the thing is, the stuff that I buy, I don't buy them for their prospective value. I just buy them because of what I want, of stuff that I want to read and I want to keep. Same thing with same thing with my toy collectibles. Like all my toy collectibles, I don't buy stuff based on it being having high resale value later. I buy just because it's something that I want to keep in. I want it for my own personal my own personal collection and for my own nostalgia. But yeah, I don't. I think that's a fraught endeavor to buy stuff based on its prospective resale value later on, especially when it comes to things like either comic books and toys. Like those are niche bubbles, and there's just no guarantee that something like that is going to be worthwhile. Like if you want to invest, you're better off just like buying stock and precious metals. Like you shouldn't like a savvy investor should not be banking his future financial worth on things as niche as comic books or toys or vintage things from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like if you're a serious investor, you should be investing in stock, real estate, and precious metals. Those are the things that are worthwhile buying. Eric says they still cater to collectors now. They do it with variant covers and number one repos. Yeah, remember I was just saying that like 10 minutes ago. Like they cater to collectors now with all the variant covers and stuff like that. And I avoid the variant covers. Like when as soon as like something new come out, it's like 20 different variant covers by different artists. And I'm like, just give me the and like so when I don't know which one is the variant cover and which one isn't, I'll just ask the people in the store. I was like, okay, which one is the base cover? I don't want the variant covers. I want the base cover. Or also in DC, like they've been bringing back like their their older stories, and they're making them into this little dense sort of like these these really dense portable sized trade paperbacks. Have you seen those? Like I've seen that like with Batman and a bunch of other stuff. I think Marvel might be doing it too, but it was definitely I think DC where they bring like they were like they're republishing like their old stuff and putting them in these little dense portable trade paperbacks. All right, so that's how I buy comics too. I buy what I want to read. Exactly. That makes the most sense. Like just buy what you want to read. Like you can't you can't have foresight into what's going to be worthwhile. Because like I said, all the things that are worthwhile now, people didn't buy with that intent when they first bought them. Like these were just like little kids buying these little 5 cent comics, 15 cent comics at the store. And then like I said, most of them would get thrown away afterwards. Just like when I was a kid, when I bought comics at 7-Eleven and I threw those away. Now, and if I still had those comics from the early 80s, they would be probably worth something if I kept them in pristine condition. But I didn't even think about it. So, for people who do have those comics that I would have read back then, like those old Spider Ham comics or Top Dog or whatever, that they're probably worth something. And it's only because so many people threw them away in the first place that those books are now valuable because there's not too many of them left. But when they're now mass produced, they're not going to have they're not going to have high value because they're mass produced. And everyone thinks, well, I need to keep this because this is going to be a collectible. If everyone is saving the same things and they're mass produced, they're not going to have high collectible value. I mean, that's just basic economic sense, but I don't know. Eric says I do collect Silver Age Superman comics from the 60s and 70s. But see, that's different. Though again, those are rare. Those are from the 60s and 70s. Like not too many of them are around because like I said, it wasn't until around the 90s that people were buying with the intent of their being collectible value because they start seeing how all these things from the 70s and the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and 30s were worth so much money. But it's like you never know. Like so for instance, you probably remember me bringing this up like a year ago, right? Or probably 2 years ago. Um, like when The Walking Dead did real became prominent on AMC, the first issue of Walking Dead in 2003 became worth $75,000 because of that bubble. And again, that's because it was an indie comic at the time. I mean, I got well, it was Image Comics, but like uh, no one, no one was buying like those Image Comics at the time with the intent of them being worth a lot of money. So when Walking Dead took off into the stratosphere, anyone who had like that first edition printing of of Walking Dead that came out in 2003, that was worth a lot of money. Like that's a rare example of something of a big bubble on a recent item. But the the whole thing of that is that that wasn't something that anyone could have seen coming. That a comic book published in 2003 will be worth $75,000. But yes, in Silver Age stuff from the 60s or or Bronze Age comics from the 70s, yeah, those are gonna be worth money. Eric says, I love Superman. I couldn't muster the strength to watch CW Superman. I didn't trust him to do him justice. Like I said, to be fair, it was not that bad. Like I had the same misgivings as you did. I thought they were gonna make him just weak and effeminate and all. They actually, like I said, I only watched the first episode, but it wasn't bad. The only thing I didn't like about it was they made it all about his family with Lois and his two kids living in, like they moved back to Smallville, so they were living in Smallville. I'm like, Lois and he having two kids now living in Smallville on a farm. I was like, I don't know about this, but apparently a lot of people liked it. Like a lot of people who had reservations about the CW said that although CW for the most part sucked, that the Superman was probably like the best show on CW. Of course, that's a low bar, right? The best show on CW is still a pretty low bar because all of those shows suck. And it says I still can't get over the ultimate Nick Fury is the biological son of the white Nick Fury. Yep, yep. And like I said, the phase one of the MCU, you could tell was like loosely based off of the ultimate Marvel universe, and that he was like Nick Fury Jr. He was this, which is when Winter Soldier first came out, I thought that's what they were hinting at because he mentioned his grandfather, right? Remember they mentioned his grandfather on Winter Soldier. He was saying his grandfather used to carry money or blah blah blah, but he never mentioned his father. And I'm like, okay, so maybe this is supposed to be like the Ultimate Universe where his father was the original Nick Fury, but they never went there with it. Sort of like how DC did with Suicide Squad when they had um what's the guy who I forgot his name, but the one who died in the second Suicide Squad, and so because he got killed, they brought his father back um, just to keep the same character name. I forgot his name, but so that's originally what I thought they were going to do with Marvel, like in the MCU, because they never mentioned who his father was. They just mentioned his grandfather. So I was like, oh, so is he Nick Fury Jr. like in the comics? That's what I always assumed when they first started that the whole Nick Fury thing when Iron Man first came out and Iron Man 2. I assumed he was Nick Fury Jr., but they never explicitly mentioned it. But they kind of left it open because they never said who his father was. He just mentioned his grandfather was black, but that could have been on his mother's side, right? All right, he said, bro, I was probably 7 or 8 years old when DOS came out. And I cried when Doomsday killed him. I was devastated. See, that's the thing. I didn't. I never read it until I mean, well, I knew the storyline like later as a teenager, but I didn't actually read it until like maybe till like what 10 years ago. I actually read the whole thing, but I saw the cartoon I saw the animated film version of it before I actually read the comic. But I just knew that Batman died. I didn't know exactly how. I remember hearing about Doomsday and that he was like someone who was so powerful that Superman died putting, killing him. But I didn't know how bad it was till I actually looked at it. But I mean, for me, for me, it wasn't the death of Superman. It was death. It was Batman, Death in the Family that got me. Because the funny thing is, Death in the Family was the very first Batman comic book I ever read, and it was my first graphic novel. So it was my first, it was my first Batman comic book. It was my first graphic novel, and in this graphic novel, I see a Robin literally getting beat to death by Joker, and then and like I said, some people only know Death in the Family from the animated film. They don't know that it's much worse in the comic book. Like, not only did he get beat to death with a crowbar by the Joker, he's like, just remember, like Joker says, just remember, this is going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt me. He just start beating them with the crowbar. And what was messed up was Joker had captured him because he had the, Robin's own mother, Jason Todd's own mother, was working for the Joker and set him up. I'm like, damn, that's fucked up. And I'm like, what? I'm like 10, 11 years old reading this. I'm like, damn, I was like, I did not know Batman comics were this dark. I was like, so he gets set up by his own biological mom working for the Joker, thinking he's coming to rescue her, and he gets trapped, gets beats to a pulp by Joker with a crowbar while his mom watches, and then the Joker ties them both up, and sets up a bomb to blow them up. Meanwhile, the Batman is racing to try to save him. And remember, they left it to a vote whether Batman comes in time to save him or let Robin die. And we find out like 30 years later that some asshole rigged the contest to make sure that Robin died. Like, it wasn't like more than likely people wanted Robin to live, but some asshole actually rigged the contest to make sure that Robin died. I don't know how they did it. Like, what they did with, like, they did something with, because it was a call. I think it was like a call in sort of thing. Like, whoever got the most votes, by phone in vote, this decided the fate of Robin, and the guy rigged the contest somehow to have all the calls come in to, in favor of Robin dying. And so he's tied up, beaten to a bloody pulp, to his mom who set him up, and now the mom is going to be killed right along with him. And so Batman doesn't get there in time. So he tries to deactivate the bomb just to realize it was rigged. He couldn't stop the bomb. So he literally shields his mom from the blast of the bomb, like dying instantly. Just like, they didn't make it too graphic, but it was still for a, a DC Comics like comic book, like that was pretty freaking. It wasn't gory, but it was dark. And on top of that, the mom was alive just in time to tell Batman that Robin tried to save her, despite the fact that she set him up, and then she died right afterwards. I'm like, damn, that I was like, that is dark, like that. And mind you, this was before the '90s, because everything. Remember, like in the '90s, the comic every comic book just got metal for no reason. Like, everything just went extreme in the '90s. But the death of Death in the Family, I think came out in 19. I think they came out in 1988, either 88 or yeah, I think it was 88. And then right along with Death in the Family was the Batman, the one where Barbara Gordon was paralyzed by the Joker. He shot her, like he shot her in the waist, beat her, stripped her, and potentially raped her. Although they leave that out the comic, but it's highly um, um, it's highly implied that he also raped her in front of Jim Gordon, which is crazy. Like I was like, why is this so dark like that? So, the, you know, I don't know what was going on, but they had some great storylines in the late the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, the Doomsday thing. I think that was just the death of Superman was just a coup d'état because that came out. What was that? 92. When I'm trying to remember, that was like what 91, 92, something like that. I think the death of Superman was just a coup d'état of just how dark they could push these storylines while still making it uh, for kids. Harris says the build up to Doomsday's clash with Superman was so good. Yeah, it was again, it was written well. Like I knew it like even as a teenager, I knew it was like gimmicky. I was like, this is gimmicky. I know they're not gonna just kill off this man. I was like, he's the biggest superhero in the world. At least is. But back then it was still Superman was the biggest. I was like, I know they're not gonna kill off this character permanently. But he was out of rotation for an entire year. They brought up the reign of Superman, and then they finally brought him back a year later. You said, "Oh, you said I never read Death in the Family." You got man, you should. It's really good. Like I said, if you've only saw the animated version, the animated version doesn't do it any justice because it doesn't show how it was his mom. He was coming to rescue his mom against Batman's wishes, and to find out that the mom, his own mother, like I was like, this person must have been reading like Sigmund Freud or something. Like I was like, this guy must have been into some Freudian type stuff. Like his own mother set him up. Yo, that shit was crazy. It was crazy. And then the other one with Barbara Gordon, that's called uh what's that called? Um Kill I forgot the name of that storyline. But then like that, I think that came out a year before or a year after Death in the Family. So those were like back to back, like just really dark stories in the Batman storyline. Like they were really doing their thing back in the late '80s when it came to Batman. Even in the early '90s, their stuff was really good. I mean, it got kind of metal. Like Batman got kind of metal too when they introduced um, Saint the Azrael as Batman temporarily when Batman had his spine severed by Bane. What's up, Snapshot? He said, "Yeah, fun watching that live grab a flashback flashbang grande this week." Oh, well, you on a completely different thing. We just talked about comic books and why the industry is failing. Um, but yeah, man, like those were really good stories. But again, like to what you're saying, Eric, like it was like gimmicky, and it was I don't I don't know if it was geared just to collectors. I think it was just I think it was just like a big marketing push by DC to get a whole bunch of people to buy up all these books. Um, I guess you could say it's for collectors, but the only reason I wouldn't, you know, I don't know. Like I said, it's weird trying to it. It just doesn't make economic sense to mass produce stuff that's geared towards collectors. Like if you want to make something geared towards collectors, you would want to make it scarce. You know what I mean? Like this is why the McRib only comes out every 5 years. like, like usually when you gear something towards the collector's market, you make a limited supply of them. That's what gives them value because you know there's only a limited supply of them anywhere in the world where you can attain it. That's what gives it collect like a collector value. But if it doesn't make sense to to um to market stuff towards the collectors and then you mass produce it, like that that goes against the whole point of it being a collectible. Like how is it a collectible if everyone has it? D was it D Bapto 699 says when does a McRib come out? Man, I don't know. Wait, wait. Didn't it just come out last year? Did, now I'm making myself hungry talking about this, bro. I didn't they. I could have swore it just came out last year. By the way, if you can't wait for the McRib, do you know 7-Eleven sells like a knockoff version? Like you can go to 7-Eleven and buy like one and then just heat it up. But yeah, 7-Eleven sells like a little knockoff McRib. For I mean, if someone really needs their fix, you say you haven't seen it in years. Let me look. I know this is a diversion from the actual topic, but now I'm curious myself. When was then I'm gonna go to bed. It's late. When was the last time the McRib came out? Using my desktop. Oh, it was 2022. Yeah, the last time McRib was available nationwide was during its farewell tour in late 2022. They always saying a farewell tour. You can't have a farewell tour and you keep coming back. That's like that's like one of those cartoons or whatever when the character gets killed. He's like, oh, I'm dying. You got me. I'm dead. I'm gone. I'm buried. I'm never coming back. It's like that's what that's what the farewell tour of a big rib is. Like it's gonna be gone for like a hot second. I mean, shit. They brought back the snack wraps last year. I bought a bunch of those when they brought back the snack wrap last year. They're not discontinued, bro. It's a marketing look. It's a marketing gimmick. You, I suspect you're kind of young. The whole McRib thing is just a marketing gimmick. Like they say, they they only have it out in limited spouts just so it can drive up people's fear for buying them when they come back. They like, bro, they've been doing it since the 80s. I've been a little. They've been bringing back the McRib sporadically since the 80s. Like they even made fun of this on The Simpsons. You know, The Simpsons always predict this stuff. Like, or look, or um, or Dave Chappelle. Remember, he's like, that's right. He said the McRib back. But guess what? If you want one, you gotta come through me. You gotta come through me, Sarah. But you cut off. You cut off. But yeah, so it said as of late 2023 and early 2024, it is not available nationwide, but it may appear in select locations. The McRib is set to return on December 3rd, 2025. See, I knew it. I knew it was back out last year. Yeah, it was briefly back, I think. I do remember buying one in 2022, though. I do remember that. He said, I'm 57 in Boston and black. Oh, my bad, bro. You're actually my senior. I'm sorry. So here's the thing. Even when they do bring it back, sometimes it may not be in your particular location. Like they may bring it back nationwide, but depending on the franchise, they may not have it. So, but yeah, I but I wasn't kidding. 7-Eleven does sell a knockoff version of the McRib that you can buy because I've bought it a few times, and it tastes pretty much the same. It's just that you have to heat it up yourself. But I think it did come back around December of. Wait, no, did it? See, the reason I can't remember is because in December all of the marketing was for the Grinch meal back in December. So if the I'm not sure if that's true because the McRib would have been eclipsed by the whole Grinch meal. Like I don't think they would have brought back the McRib to have it eclipsed by their other promotion for the Grinch meal. Um, see, this I'm using Microsoft Copilot. I'm gonna switch to Google because Google has better search results than um than Microsoft Copilot. Uh, so it said, yeah, it since returned for a brief appearance in late 2024 and again in November 2025, often at select locations as a seasonal limited time item, despite being retired as a permanent menu item years ago. But again, they keep saying it was retired as a permanent menu item. It was never a permanent menu item, except the only time it was a permanent menu item was literally back in the 80s. And you and I mean, you're a little older than I am, but we both remember in the 80s that like the McRib was like a permanent item at that time. They said what about the Shamrock Shake? I can't even. That's a whole different thing. They they had the what's that little purple monster character? He has his own shake. The Shamrock Shake I haven't seen in a few years. But like I said, these things come back in rotation because they purposefully make them uh limited time items to drive up demand for it so that way every time they bring it back they will sell they will sell really well, and they keep that demand going by making it limited time items. They've been doing that for the McRib, like I said, since the 80s. um because I don't know why they're saying late 2022 it was discontinued, because like I said, it was never a permanent item back in 2022. That's the whole reason. Like my friend and I had bought one. Well, at least I bought one. I don't think he bought one. Grimace. Yeah, they had the Grimace shake. So I bought the Grimace shake last year. That was good. I'm not that smart. I just remember stuff and they can look stuff up online. But I appreciate it. But yeah, it's a promotional gimmick. Like they make things a limited time item to drive up demand, and so then when they bring it back, all these people be like, "Oh, you know what? The McRib is back," and so everyone goes to the stores and get it. So I believe they're going to do that with the Grinch meal from now on because it did so well back in December. I think they're going to keep bringing it back every couple of years. Like they had a huge promotion for that. Like it was on Instagram. Like they had like the Grinch. They had someone connected with the actual Dr. Seuss estate, um, promoting it on their Instagram and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. So I know. So they already said that the Grinch meal will eventually return. And yeah, the Grimace shake came out a year before that because that's when they had the McDonald Land meal. So the McDonald Land meal was like sort of like a adult version of the Happy Meal, and they were selling this when it came with it, like these McDonald Land 10 sets, and inside is like stickers and stuff like that. Sticker and a membership to the McDonald Land card. I mean McDonald Land World. And so they have these special adult meals every year now. The this was one of the first ones I remember. Was with this guy. Um, then they had the they had the Kerwin Frost McNugget buddies, who's like a like this urban artist, and they had like different McNuggets based off of his designs. Like this guy. Yeah, yeah, I collect these things. But yeah, it's yeah, I collect stuff. So that's why me and Eric were having this discussion on um on comic books, and how he was saying that one of the things that messed up the comic book industry was that they were gearing their comics to collectors instead of to like the the, the readers. And as with um like I was saying with McDonald's and stuff like that, like um you can't make stuff for collectors and then mass produce it, because the whole value to a collector is the scarcity of the item itself. So if you mass produce something, you're just you're defeating the very purpose of it being a collectible, right? It's sort of like a woman with a high body count. Like it kind of like she kind of loses her value when she has like when she slept with like 2,000 men or something like that, right? Like not worth as much as someone who slept with like less than 10. Someone gonna get me for saying that, but I don't care. It's true. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna get ready to go. It's getting late. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna jump off this live. I will be back tomorrow with a different topic. But yeah, I just thought this was fun because I saw the YouTuber Nerd Roddick talking about it. And he was talking about why the comic book industry was failing. And aside from the stuff that we were mentioning about them catering to a collector's market instead of to readers, was the fact that just to summarize it from what I was saying earlier, was also that comic book stores were failing because they had to compete with the big bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and online retailers like Amazon, and then the and then the big companies like DC and Marvel were pretty much just pushing their superhero stuff when there are all sorts of facets of literature that comic books could do, and which is and so they're losing ground to manga, which are the Japanese comic books, as well as the Korean ones, the manhwa, because in manga in Japan you have literally every subgenre of literature can be found in manga, like detective stuff, fantasy, horror, um, fantasy, slice what they call slice of life, which is like everyday drama type stuff. Um, pretty much any pretty much anything you can think of in literature, you can find in manga, and you don't get the same diversity in American comic books. And then the final thing is that a lot of these left leaning comic book writers in America are trying to push their own views into the comic books, and it's alienating a lot of their fan base. So, with that being said, good night. Thank you, um, thank you for coming in on my live. Hope to see you again. I'll be streaming roughly around the same time tomorrow, around somewhere between 9:30 10 p.m. All right, take care. Thank you guys, and I'm out.